She thought he was the cleaner, but the man fixing the printer was the super-rich boss in disguise. "Seriously, not now," Betty said quietly, shutting the printer tray closed for the third time. The screen showed the same message stubbornly. "Paper jam, tray 2. Her fingers shook as she tried to force the drawer open again. Her report, the result of 3 weeks of working hard, needed to be in her manager's hands in less than 15 minutes. The meeting upstairs had already started. From behind her, someone complained, "If you're done crying over the printer, maybe let someone else try." Betty flinched. "Sorry," she whispered, stepping aside as the man passed by with a loud sigh. She massaged her head, her shirt wet around the neck. She hadn't even had her coffee, and her stomach felt sick, not from hunger, but from that familiar, sinking feeling of failure. At 29, she had a 3-year-old daughter and a 2-bedroom apartment she could barely afford. 3 years before, she had been a mom at home, baking dinosaur cupcakes and folding baby clothes. Then came the divorce, being cheated on, the court dates, the long, sad silence of her parents not approving, and now she was an assistant no one noticed on a 1-year contract at one of the largest technology companies in the state. No one remembered her name. They called her admin, or worse, nothing at all. She stared at the machine, wanting it to work again. "Please," she whispered, her fingers ready over the power button like a doctor. "Just this once." "Need help?" The voice surprised her, soft, relaxed, a bit funny. She turned to see a man standing there, maybe in his mid-30s, tall with wide shoulders under a rolled-up blue shirt. His jeans were old but clean, and he held a tool easily at his side, as if he'd used it his whole life. No ID, no papers, just a calm way of being and the light smell of fresh pine soap. Yes, the tray's stuck," she spoke with difficulty, stepping back. "I think it hates me." He laughed quietly and bent down beside the printer, his hands moving with skillful ease. "Machines don't feel hate," he said, "but they get tired, like people." Betty watched as he slid out the tray and opened a back part she never saw existed. His hands were clean, but hard, real hands, not like someone who works only in an office. He didn't look like someone from this building, where everyone wore expensive watches. He didn't even wear a belt. "Thanks," she said softly, holding her papers tight to her chest. He glanced up at her. "Hard morning?" Betty laughed sharply, then stopped herself. "You could say that," she replied. "I'm probably the only person here who cries in the bathroom at 8 a.m. on a Monday." He smirked but said nothing, gently moving a lever inside the tray. "I swear," she went on, her voice suddenly free because she was so tired. "This place, it's all shiny glass walls and fake smiles. Everyone talks about numbers, teamwork, and results, but no one truly sees each other. My manager, brilliant on paper, is very cold in real life." Quietly, the man pulled out a crinkled piece of paper that had twisted into the printer's roller. "There's the cause of the problem." Betty opened her eyes wide. "You fixed it?" He nodded, stood, and cleaned his hands on a small cloth from his back pocket. "You should be good now." As the printer started working again, Betty nearly cried again. "Thank you, really. You just saved my entire week." He handed her the first new, clean paper as it came out. They touched hands briefly, and she looked up into his eyes. They were gray, serious, but not mean. "You're welcome," he just said. She tilted her head. "Your name? You don't have an ID?" He paused, then smiled. "Just here for a moment." Before she could ask more, he started to turn away, but then stopped and looked back. "Sometimes people act like they don't see," he said quietly, "until someone brave speaks up." Betty froze, holding the warm paper in her hand. But when she looked up again, he was already gone, left the hallway as quietly as he arrived. For a moment, she forgot the time, the meeting, the stress. For the first time in months, someone truly noticed her. And it was a stranger in jeans and rolled sleeves, with no name, no title, and a tool to make her feel important again. She pressed the button to reprint the final copy. As the pages slid out, her hands felt steadier, her back a little straighter, her eyes less tired. Something changed inside her, She could feel it. The email arrived without any fuss early Monday morning. No title, just one sentence. Please report to the executive office on the 12th floor at 10 a.m. Betty froze, reading it 5 times again, her hands gripping her keyboard tightly as her stomach felt a sudden fear. Mason Hayes, the main boss. She immediately feared the worst. Had someone told on her? Was it about that late money record? Or maybe someone heard her complaining about the manager by the copier. Her face turned red just remembering it. She had nearly cried that morning in frustration, standing in front of the broken printer, and then him, the man with rolled sleeves and jeans. She had thought he was a repairman, just a guy in rolled-up sleeves and jeans. He fixed the machine, hardly saying anything, and left her with a strange sentence she couldn't forget. Sometimes people act like they don't see until someone brave speaks. And now this email came at 9:57 a.m. Betty stood by the elevator, her shirt neatly tucked, hands sweaty, heart beating loudly in her ears. When the doors opened to the 12th floor, she stepped into another world. The lighting here was warmer, golden. The carpet made her steps quiet. The space smelled lightly of wood and something costly she didn't know. Everything was dark wood, dull black and soft materials, very different from the buzzing bright office spaces 2 floors below. The receptionist greeted her with a perfect smile. "Mr. Hayes is expecting you." Her throat felt tight as she followed the corridor past smooth glass walls, every step heavier than the last. The big doors at the end opened by themselves with a soft click, and he was there. No jeans now. The man from the printer now stood behind a massive desk, dressed in a well-fitting dark gray suit, serious gray eyes, a smooth chin, and a calm way of standing. The same man, but somehow totally different. Betty's voice stopped working. "You?" Mason Hayes nodded a little. "Yes, I remember you. Betty, right?" She nodded. "Hardly. Sorry for the secret. Please have a seat." She sat slowly, holding her bag tightly in her lap. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," he said. "I asked you here because you showed me something important." Betty looked confused. He walked around the desk, leaned on its edge, arms crossed easily. "For the past few weeks I've been walking around secretly," he explained. "No names, no introductions, just listening and watching. The truth is our company's grown quickly. Money is up, new ideas are booming. But something is missing." He paused. "We lost our human touch." Betty said nothing, didn't know if she could speak. He smiled kindly. "Then I saw you. You smiled at people who didn't smile back, helped that new intern who forgot her code, stayed calm when that printer broke down. And you spoke truthfully, not meanly, just truly." Her face turned red, remembering her exact words. "This place needs people who truly care." "I heard you," Mason said, still calm, and I agreed. She bit her lip. "I didn't know." "I know," he interrupted gently. "That's why." He walked over to a table and picked up a thin folder. "I'm forming a small team inside Project Phoenix. We're changing how we lead with understanding, welcoming everyone, and true connections. I want you on this team." Her eyes grew big. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly." She let out a nervous breath. "I'm just an assistant. You're someone who keeps working even without praise, who speaks up without a special place. That's how real leaders act, Betty. Real leadership." She felt a lump in her throat. She tried to make it go away. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he just said. She looked at him closely, and for the first time saw not just the main boss, but the man behind the desk, the one who chose to walk around instead of staying high up. "I'd be happy to," she whispered. "Wednesday, 8:30 a.m., meeting room B. Just come as you are," he said as she left the office. The hallway didn't feel scary anymore. Her steps felt easier, and something inside her changed. For the first time in years, someone saw her, and even more surprising, she was starting to understand herself. Betty had never been to such a meeting before. There were only 5 people in the glass-walled meeting room on the 10th floor chosen by Mason Hayes himself. Each one came from a different department, different background, and different level in the company. but somehow it worked well. The first time she stepped in, Betty held her notebook tightly like a shield. She wore her next best shirt and had checked her hair 3 times that morning. She was used to just listening, not the one expected to talk. But Mason greeted her with a nod, even pulled out a chair for her himself and said, "We don't do formal rules here, we do truth." She was quiet in that first meeting. She listened more than she talked, noting how the others shared ideas about making work fairer and kinder. Mason never took over the meeting. He asked questions, let silence last until someone spoke, and listened as if it was his most important duty. The next day, Betty found a cup of coffee waiting on her desk before the meeting. It was just how she liked it. Light, no sugar. Under the cup's paper cover was a small post-it note in small, leaning writing. "Thanks for showing me how much kindness matters. M." Betty stared at it, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No one had ever thanked her simply for being kind. After 3 weeks, something changed. She didn't hesitate anymore when asked for her thoughts. When the topic of feeling totally exhausted mentally came up, she spoke quietly but clearly. Sometimes people quit, not because of too much work. They leave because no one notices them. Mason looked at her, nodded, and wrote it down exactly. Later that day, he stopped her in the hallway. "That sentence, it's going up in the next company news. It should be heard." Betty turned red. "Really?" He smiled. "Really?" Every week, a new coffee cup was there for her, sometimes with a saying, sometimes with a thanks. Once it simply read, "You've made more change here in 2 weeks than some in 10 years. She started acting differently, not for Mason to like her, but because for the first time she felt she was important, that she could change more than just numbers. Other team members asked for her ideas. One even called her the most important part of the project during a brainstorming session. Betty laughed it off, but inside she felt something strong. For years she had made herself smaller to fit in. Now she was learning to be confident again. Mason never made it about himself. He always gave praise and always asked how others were doing before telling them what to do. Yet, there was something in the way he looked at Betty during those meetings, a focus that wasn't just work-related, but always proper. She noticed how he stopped when she spoke, leaned a bit forward, hands together, truly listening. No judgment in his eyes, just a kind of understanding. After a very long meeting, as they left the room, Mason walked with her. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" "At truly seeing people. That's unusual." She didn't know what to say back, so she simply said, "Thank you." He looked at her then, not like a boss at an employee, but like someone reading a story that isn't finished. "You remind me," he said softly, "why I first began this company." And just like that, the feeling between them became warmer, closer, not romantic yet, but clearly human. By the end of the month, Betty no longer checked her words twice. She no longer sat nervously. She spoke, she argued, she suggested, and when she laughed, she didn't apologize. Each morning, the coffee cup still waited. But now she looked forward to it, not just for the coffee, but for what it meant. A small action, a big change, and a man who saw her as a person, not a task. Betty always tried to stay unnoticed. Even in the new team meetings about company culture, and even with Mason's support, she tried not to get noticed too much. But lately, she could feel the change, and not all of it was welcome. People started talking quietly the week after Mason quoted her in the company news. Betty had sent the line without her name, but somehow it became known. "She acts better than us because the boss likes her," someone said quietly just outside the break room. Betty, stepping out to fill her water bottle, stopped when she heard it. The voice was Dana's, an older assistant who'd been at the company for over a decade. "I bet she thinks she's next to get a better job," another voice added. "You know what happens when the boss notices a pretty person." Betty stayed still. Her hand squeezed the bottle, the plastic crinkling under her grip. She blinked hard and went back to her desk, heart beating fast. She had always feared this, being noticed, only to be criticized. Later that day, waiting for the elevator alone, the same group came close. They became uncomfortably quiet when they saw her, standing just outside the closing doors. The air was heavy with tension. Then suddenly, Mason came into the hallway. He looked neat as usual, dark jacket, white shirt with rolled sleeves, but his eyes looked at the group, showing his clear message without words. He stood with them by the elevator, standing between Betty and the others. The silence broke. Dana coughed, pretending to look at her phone. Another woman fixed her ID string, not looking at anyone. Mason's voice was calm but strong. "In this company, we respect brave talkers," he said, his meaning very clear. "You can join the change or be left out." The elevator bell rang. He stepped in first, holding the door gently. No one followed. Betty stood frozen for a second, then slowly joined him inside. They both stayed quiet, but when their eyes met, Mason gave her the smallest, most comforting smile, a smile that said, "You're not by yourself." Later that day, HR announced all employees were to attend a new Understanding in the Workplace training, with the bosses leading the classes. It wasn't said as a punishment, but everyone knew why it was happening. The next morning, Betty came to her desk and saw a small white box tied with a gold ribbon and a folded note written in curvy, slightly shaky handwriting. "We're sorry. Thanks for doing what we were afraid to do." Inside the box were lemon cookies, Betty's favorite. She didn't know how they knew, but the act immediately made her feel better. She looked up and saw Dana watching her from the other side of the floor. Their eyes met, and Dana nodded slightly. At lunch, 2 of the women from that same group asked Betty if she wanted to eat with them from a restaurant. She paused, then said yes. While eating, they talked about children, late emails, and how expensive parking was. Simple small talk slowly became laughter. By the week's end, they were sharing restaurant menus and arguing who had the best work cups. One afternoon, Dana tapped Betty's desk and gave her coffee. "Friends?" she said half seriously. Betty smiled. "I think we're much more than that." In the weeks that followed, Betty didn't feel unseen anymore. Not because she was popular, but because for the first time in years, she felt like she fit in. Her co-workers weren't perfect, and neither was she. But things had improved, and sometimes that was all it needed to build something better. Not a speech, not a rule, just one small, brave moment. And someone, maybe not all, choosing to follow. The apartment was quiet, only Carol's gentle, rough breathing. Her small body curled on the couch, red with fever. Betty sat on the floor, back against the coffee table, phone in hand, checking the time between counting seconds between coughs. She had already called the pediatrician and gave the right medicine. Now there was only waiting left to do. Carol moved and made soft sounds, reaching out while sleeping. Betty moved closer and gently touched her daughter's wet curls. "Mommy's here," she said softly, her voice breaking. It had been years since Betty felt so unable to help. Since her divorce, she'd learned to manage alone, taking kid to school, paying late bills, hospital trips. No one else came. She stopped expecting anyone. That afternoon, she had emailed her manager and Mason, saying sorry many times for missing the culture meeting. Mason's reply had come in less than 2 minutes. "Look after your child. Everything else can wait." She read it again. No one had ever said that to her. At 3:40 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Surprised, Betty walked quietly to the door's spy hole, thinking it was a neighbor or wrong delivery. But there stood a delivery man in uniform, holding a small, bright blue package with ribbon. "For Betty Moore?" he asked when she opened the door a bit. She nodded slowly and took the package. "No need to sign," he said with a smile, then left. Betty closed, locked the door, and turned the package in her hands. Her name was written by hand in black ink on the tag. It was light, shaped like a toy box. She took it back to the living room and sat with Carol again. The ribbon came off easily. Inside was a soft, furry bunny, white with droopy ears and pink hearts sewn on its feet. Carol had once seen that exact toy at the store. Under the bunny was a folded note for Carol. "Hope she gets well soon from someone who thinks her mom is doing great." Betty opened her eyes wide at the writing. There was a second line written below in smaller letters. "You look after so many people. Let someone look after you just a little." She read the note over and over. Her hands slowly covered her mouth. Tears came before she could stop them, gentle at first, then heavy and fast. She cried not only for Carol or fear of being alone in trouble, but for every day she smiled when she felt unseen. For times she was strong because she had no choice, and now because someone had quietly, kindly said, "You don't need to be." She held the note to her chest. When Carol moved again, Betty picked her up and put the bunny on her lap. The child's hot fingers held one of its ears without opening her eyes. "Look, dear," Betty said softly. "He came just for you." The next day, Carol's fever went away, and the soft bunny stayed in her arms all night. At work the next Monday, Betty saw familiar writing in the corner of a white sticky note on her desk. "Hope the bunny helped?" There was no name, but she knew. She smiled to herself as she sat, fingers touching her keyboard. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was carrying everything alone. Someone noticed, and someone cared. Betty was walking home from Carol's school when she saw him. Dressed in a buttoned shirt and pants, hair neat as if acting, Tom leaned against a black SUV parked by the curb. He looked like he was from another life, a life Betty worked hard to escape, but the sparkle in his eyes was still the same. "Well, well," he said, standing straight. "You live in a new flat now. New man, new life, right? Must be good." Betty felt very sad. She pulled Carol close, squeezing her daughter's small hand. "I'm just here to pick up my kid," she said without emotion. "Leave," Tom smirked. "Don't worry, I'm not here to make trouble. Just thought we should sort things out like grown-ups." She didn't answer. He took a folded paper from his pocket and showed it. "Listen, I've been thinking. All the years you made me unhappy, bossy, always judging, cold. I think I deserve something for it." Her lips opened. "What?" $25,000, he said calmly. "Call it payment. For hurting my feelings, whatever you want. You can pay now, right? Your company is doing good. You have a boyfriend." "Clearly, I won't give you any money," she said sharply, her voice shaking. He put the paper back in his pocket. "Maybe I ask for childcare rights. Tell the court how unstable you are. Sadness, no family help, a new boyfriend getting in the way. You know how that seems." Carol pulled her coat, confused by the tight feeling. Betty swallowed hard and led her to the door without speaking. She didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling for hours, then walked the living room until she was too tired to stand. She had no clear proof of Tom's past threats, no court order to keep him away. No one saw his control and loneliness he caused for years. At 2 a.m., she sat on the bathroom floor, door locked, lights off, knees to her chest, hands holding her head. She breathed in short, quick breaths. She looked at herself in the mirror, red eyes, tight shoulders. But behind the fear, a strong will appeared. "I left once," she said softly. "I can be strong again." The next day at work she looked brave, but Mason saw it. After the meeting he called her into his office. He didn't push, he just looked at her with worry that felt both kind and strong. At last she told him everything. Mason listened, quiet, until she finished. Then, without a pause, he stood, took his coat and said, "Come with me." They didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, he drove her to a private office downtown, glass windows, shiny floors, and a sign that said, "Shelton and Crane, Family Law." "I trust them," Mason said, "but I won't speak for you. You lead here. I just brought you." Inside, the lawyer, a calm woman in her 50s named Marlene, welcomed Betty like an old friend. "Let's sit," she said softly. "Tell me everything." Betty opened her mouth, and for the first time she said everything. The control, making her feel bad, the quiet threats, how Tom made her feel like a problem in her own life, and now the blackmail. Marlene listened carefully, then leaned back. "We'll need emails, phone messages, anything. If there's written proof, we'll find it. I've seen men like him. We don't lose to men like him." Later that night, as Betty left the building, she saw Mason waiting in the lobby with 2 teas. He gave one to her without speaking. Betty drank, her hands still shaking, but less than before. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me," Mason said. "You were the one who was brave today. I just drove." The courtroom felt colder than Betty thought. Light walls, bright lights, rows of strangers waiting with confused lives. But nothing felt colder than the man sitting opposite her. Tom, her ex-husband, dressed like he was the injured party, a neat shirt, smooth face, that same proud look that used to break her confidence. Betty sat straight, hands flat on her lap. Next to her, Marlene, her lawyer, was calm and ready. Behind her, in the third row, Mason sat quietly. He had insisted on being there not to talk, but to show she wasn't alone. The judge came in, and her case was announced. Tom's lawyer spoke first. He told a story of mental pain, money problems, and emotional hurt from Tom's view. "You wasted years of his life," the lawyer said. "And now, with her having a good job and a rich partner, she owes him money for his emotional suffering." Betty tightened her jaw, keeping her breathing even. Then it was Marlene's turn. She stood calmly, her voice smooth as she showed the facts. Past behavior of control, phone messages where Tom threatened to take their child if he didn't get money, and a neighbor's written complaint seeing Tom yell outside Betty's old apartment. And lastly, the email. Marlene showed it to the judge, a printed message where Tom wrote, "You think because some rich man is in your life now, you can forget the past, pay me, or I'll make sure the court takes your daughter." The judge asked Betty if she wanted to speak. She stood. Her knees shook, but her voice was strong. "For years, I was silent. I stayed quiet because I thought it kept me and my child safe, but silence never saved me. It only saved him." Tom rolled his eyes, but Betty didn't look at him. "I'm not speaking today as a perfect person. I'm not even speaking as someone not afraid. I'm very scared, but I'm speaking anyway because I am a mother, and Carol deserves a life without fear, without being controlled from men who believe love means power. She deserves better, and so do I." The room was quiet. The judge looked at Betty with a kind of respect. After final words, the judge called a break. Mason didn't move, but Betty turned briefly, and they looked at each other. He nodded very slightly. His hands were tightly gripping the wooden armrest. He was proud and angry, holding back everything but faith in her. The judge came back with the decision. The request for money was rejected, and Tom's request for childcare was refused. Also, based on proof and past actions, the court made a lasting order. Tom was not to come near Betty or Carol ever again. Betty finally breathed out after days. When it was done, she stepped out into the courthouse hallway. The sounds of other cases were quiet behind her. Mason was there. "You were amazing," he said softly. Betty blinked back tears. "No," she said softly. "I was just tired of being scared." He nodded. Then, without another word, he took her hand, not to lead her, not to comfort her, but just to hold it. It was equal, there, firm, and for the first time in years, Betty didn't pull back. The year-end party was always just a formal event for Betty, a crowded room with too many name tags and not enough real feeling. But this year, everything felt changed. The big open area on the 12th floor changed into a warm, candle-lit place with soft music, laughter, and the smell of cinnamon pastries. A sign above read, "Celebrating growth, bravery, and kindness." Betty stood near the back, blending in as usual, but she felt Mason was there across the room before seeing him. He was not in a suit, just a dark sweater and rolled sleeves, like when she first met him, like the man who fixed the copier and quietly gave her a reason to speak. The lights got a bit dimmer as the HR boss came to the mic. "And now," she said, smiling, "we have a special part, an award that's new this year, the Inspiration Award. It goes to someone who showed us that bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it works quietly, steadily, and still changes everything." Betty's name was called. Clapping followed, real, strong, the kind that went deeper than the building's walls. As Betty walked up, her heart beat fast. Mason met her at the stage, holding the award, a fancy glass art like a rising fire. But instead of giving it, he took her hand. "I wasn't meant to be here today," Mason started, his voice strong but kind. "I mean, a main boss usually doesn't fix copiers or give awards, but some things are worth breaking the rules for." He turned to the crowd. "We need more people like Betty," he said, looking at her eyes. "And I need her too." There was a pause, a quiet that filled the room. Someone whistled softly, others laughed. But Mason wasn't just smiling to show off, his hand stayed on hers. Betty's throat felt tight, but before she spoke, a small blue shape rushed toward them. "Mommy, Mommy!" Carol ran to the stage, holding a paper star carefully in her small hands. "Are you my friend now, Mr. Mason?" she asked, tilting her head with a big, toothy smile. Mason bent down, taking the star gently from her hand. "I'd like to be more than that," he said. "If your mom agrees." Betty couldn't talk at first. Tears came to her eyes, but she didn't wipe them, not this time. She just nodded, smiling despite her feelings. "We both say yes." Laughter and clapping filled the room again, but Betty hardly heard it. All she saw was Mason kneeling with Carol, holding that delicate paper star as if it was everything. And somehow, it was. Spring arrived early that year. The park near Betty's flat began to have soft pink and green plants, kids playing by the pond, the sun warming the earth just enough to make everyone believe in fresh starts. On a quiet path, 3 people walked slowly. Mason held Carol's hand, her hair bouncing with each step. Betty walked with them, her fingers linked with Mason's, as they now did easily. Carol suddenly ran ahead, giggling, holding a ribbon-tied paper star. "Look," she called back. "It's flying." They watched her, feeling full of joy. Betty leaned into Mason a bit. "Did you ever think," she said softly, "that a broken printer would bring 2 people together?" He smiled, eyes showing small lines at the corners. "I think it found exactly the right people." As Carol spun under the falling petals, life's view slowly widened, golden light covering them like a promise. And somewhere, in a quiet but sure voice, the story ended. Time to fix a machine. She needed someone to trust her. Together, they helped each other. If this story touched you, even a little, if you saw yourself in Betty's quiet bravery or Mason's quiet trust, then maybe, like them, you also believe that even small acts of kindness can change someone's life. Because sometimes all it needs is one broken copier, one brave voice, one person who chooses to listen. And if you believe in stories that help, that uplift, that remind us of our inner strength, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more real tales of bouncing back, love, and new opportunities. Click that bell so you never miss a moment that might just change your day or your life. Thank you for watching, and remember, true love doesn't save you. It sees you and walks with you.